Hi there, welcome. This is the Kelly's Astrology podcast, where you can find insight, guidance, and understanding through astrology. I'm Kelly, and I'll be your host. Hey there, and welcome to another episode of the Kelly's Astrology podcast. In today's show, I'm going to dive into the upcoming lunar or full moon eclipse, which is happening at 12 Virgo on Tuesday, March the 3rd. So it's going to be all about the eclipse, all about the South Node, and a lot about Mercury in today's episode. Before I dive into all of those juicy eclipse insights, two things. One, I have a free eclipse survival guide for you. I'm going to tell you about that at the end of the show. And before we go any further, I want to make sure you know that I am going on astrology retreat in France this March. So I'd invite you to join me in Strasbourg for 2 days at the end of March for a deep dive into the strengths and supports in your birth chart. In this 2-day retreat, you will learn a mix of traditional astrology techniques to help you better understand yourself and your potential. You can find out more about my France retreat this March via the calendar page on my website. So pop over to kellysastrology.com, click the calendar page, and just scroll down till you find the France event. Or, of course, we'll include that direct link in the show notes below as well. So we've got a lunar eclipse in Virgo coming up on Tuesday, the 3rd of March. Now, I think it's important to know that when astrologers think about the eclipse, there's the exact moment of the lunation, in this case, the full moon, which is like the peak of the eclipse energy. But that kind of, wild, maybe a little chaotic, just that general feeling of being kind of out of sorts with yourself or just out of time and out of regular rhythm, that's actually going to be around for about 2 days. And that 2-day window will cover the whole time that the moon is transiting or moving through the sign of Virgo. Now, because this eclipse in Virgo is around 12 degrees, which is about the middle of the sign, very loosely, if you know the exact time of the eclipse in your location, you're going to want to allow 24 hours before and after the actual moment of the eclipse to kind of capture that whole potentially a little bit wild kind of eclipse portal energy. So just to give you like one point of reference, and then you can all use this or check a guide for your area. But for instance, Ottawa, which is the Eastern time zone in North America, so Ottawa, New York, Toronto, all in the same time zone, the eclipse is exact at 6:37 a.m. on Tuesday morning. So if you were in that time zone, you'd be sort of having an understanding that the moon is in Virgo from about 6:30 Monday morning till probably a little bit after 6:30 on Wednesday morning. But that is your kind of 48-hour window of just understanding that that kind of eclipse portal or the wildness of eclipse vibes is active through that whole time. So that's an important initial piece to kind of lay out. Now, what I'd like to do is what we typically do when we're looking at a lunation or an eclipse in detail is I want to break down some of the key points that are in the chart of the eclipse so that you can understand the energy that this eclipse is likely to bring forward. So first up, many of you will be thinking, okay, it's an eclipse in Virgo. How does that maybe emphasize Virgo and Virgo traits or characteristics? So that's definitely one way to think about it. A quality of analysis or organizing. It might also be a quality to do with problem solving or wanting to create systems and processes. There can be a health focus with Virgo. And of course, that kind of productive, dutiful, kind of helpful energy is also there. But when I think about the eclipse, I'm going to go way beyond that because to me, the eclipse is not so much that it's Virgo specifically, but it's that it's an eclipse on the South Node, for instance. And it's an eclipse that is ruled by Mercury. And so I want to really dive into what the South Node influence of the eclipse is telling us And I want to explore what the condition of Mercury at the time of the eclipse is offering as well. So eclipses can either be a north node eclipse or a south node eclipse, and you pick the node that is nearest to the moon at the time of the eclipse. And so because the south node is at 8 Virgo and the eclipse is taking place at 12 Virgo, that's how we know this is a south node eclipse. It is a total lunar eclipse, and it's a more intense kind of eclipse because the moon is only a few degrees away from the node at the time of the eclipse. So a south node eclipse highlights a couple of really core themes. It highlights themes to do with release, emptying out, we could say endings or closure or letting go. The South Node is also connected to a spiritualizing process, and that often means shifting your attention and focus away from ambition or goals of accumulation towards more kind of spiritual or meaningful choices. So this is less, the South Node eclipse is sort of anti-ambition, if you like. It is also very much about it's not an eclipse about accumulating. It'd be anti-accumulating or like anti-consumerist, if you like. And that's all tied to the South Node. Now, we know this is where we could bring Virgo in a little bit. We know that Virgo likes to keep things ordered and organized and streamlined. You know, the natural Virgo decorating style would be typically quite minimalist or, you know, extreme organization. And then if we factor in this South Node energy, keep in mind the South Node itself has been transiting Virgo since January of 2025, and we have until mid or late July of 26 with the South Node in Virgo. So we're in a longer cycle or season of our lives, which is South Node in Virgo energy, but it's really coming to a peak at this eclipse. So if we know that Virgo is already about like streamlined and simplifying and minimalist, and now we have this South Node Virgo eclipse coming in, we know that this is like taking our decluttering or clearing out to a whole new level. So whether you are physically clearing clutter in your space, this is like go for it, go to the nth degree, detox, purge, purify. Whether you are clearing stuff out of your schedule, maybe you're withdrawing from things, you're stepping down, you're pulling back. That's also a way to use this South Node Virgo eclipse energy. Maybe you are getting into that kind of reducing consumption piece where you are just consciously choosing to buy less or to upgrade less often. You know, instead of getting a new whatever, however frequently you typically do, you're like, you know what I've got is still really, you know, good enough for what I need. And so this is how we get into some of these kind of themes of the South Node. I also think about the South Node as a little bit like that Buddhist idea of non-attachment, you know, that we kind of cling and hold on to things, we get attached to things, like not just physically, but also emotionally and psychologically. And in the end, none of that actually matters. And so how can you kind of come back to the essence of who you are, the essence of your life, being detached from all the external stuff? And for many of us, that will be best supported by quiet, reflective, or meditative practices, maybe intentionally doing less on the day of the eclipse, or maybe the day before and the day after, and really opting for kind of quiet spaciousness or emptiness in your schedule, just to be with what is when everything else falls away. A book that I have been reading because I love a good kind of South Node declutter vibe anyway, a book that caught my eye earlier this year, and probably somebody somewhere mentioned it, but I've been diving in and out of it, and it has taken my kind of decluttering to a new level, but it has also helped really, at a deeper level, change my relationship to stuff. And this book is called Goodbye Things. The subtitle is The New Japanese Minimalism. And I may not pronounce the name correctly because it's by a Japanese author, but I'll do my best and we'll include it in the show notes. Fumio Sasaki. So the book is called Goodbye Things, and it's a really like simple, beautiful, clean book. If you're watching the video, I'm showing my tabs right now. And there was one heading I wanted to share that was like, this is a great piece. And it's written in kind of a short vignette style. There is some perspective or points of view about stuff and not having stuff that is really thought-provoking. I will say the author does have quite an extreme take on this minimalist approach of living and being. And I certainly cannot claim to be at their level or even aspiring to that. But to just help me get rid of congestion in my space and to even think about how I use my time differently, it's been really eye-opening. So there's written in lots of little short vignettes and tips, so it's very easy to digest and read. So just the headline I wanted to share, it's one of the tips. It's number 3 on a list. So inside the book is one section called 55 Tips to Help You Say Goodbye to Your Things. And one tip number 3 is when you discard something, you gain more than you lose. And I think that is a really beautiful, thought-provoking piece. And there's some explanatory info, but I won't, read the whole book to you. If you're interested in these ideas, go and grab it. It'd be a great thing to read and reflect on through the eclipse. But the idea that when we give up something, we often feel like we're losing. But the point of view that's presented here is that by getting rid of a thing that might require caring or organizing or cleaning or time or energy in some other capacity, when we get rid of that, we reclaim all the associated stuff around it. So there's just a few ideas like that I love. And they seem very resonant for this Virgo South Node lunar eclipse. So the South Node piece of this full moon or lunar eclipse is very much about letting go, clearing out, not just physically, but also emotionally and energetically as well, and taking time to acknowledge how your priorities have changed. I think a huge part of the longer South Node in Virgo transit has been to help you shift your thinking and to bring awareness to what kind of habits or behaviors you're engaged in that are really rich and stimulating for your mind, for your brain, for your intellect, and which habits and behaviors you're engaged in that are actually unsettling your mind or making you worry or increasing a sense of stress. So there's a little bit of, what insights about mindset or mental health are you getting under this eclipse? Because remember, it is in Virgo and it is an eclipse ruled by Mercury, which we're going to talk about a lot in just a moment. So with the South Node eclipse, what kind of replacements or changes are you going to make that will improve your mindset, that maybe help reduce stress or worry, and that help you kind of protect your attention? Like a very simple thing that I have been working on just to kind of, like probably many of you, reduce the amount of time I waste scrolling online is I try to keep a couple of print material around the house, like a couple of magazines that I enjoy reading, even the weekend newspapers, which I find sometimes have just really interesting tidbits of things, not so much for hard news, but for more thought-provoking pieces or sometimes lifestyle material. Because I realize that sometimes when I end up scrolling, I'm looking to read something that's a little bit lighter. And I realized that I can meet that need in a much more nourishing way in the way that I used to, kind of pre-internet, pre-social media, which was to read something in print. So obviously, I'm a book-loving person. We've got books all around the house, but sometimes I don't want to get into the more substantive book-level piece. And so having some magazines or a newspaper where I can kind of flick while I have a cup of tea or, a bit of a brain break in between work. That's just an example of a switch that I'm looking to make because I always feel a little bit better after reading a magazine or perhaps reading, a 1,000-word, piece rather than scrolling mindlessly online. So I think this South Node in Virgo can help with that. So let me know what switches or changes you are thinking about, or maybe you've recently made. Let me know in the comments below. So this eclipse is in Virgo, and that means the ruler of Virgo is the ruler of the eclipse. So Mercury is our eclipse ruler. And so we want to take a look at Mercury's condition at the time of the eclipse to get more info about what this eclipse might be about. And here's where we run into a little bit of a snag, because technically Mercury's condition is quite challenged. There's a lot of technically difficult or maybe topsy-turvy features to Mercury as it is in charge of this eclipse. So this eclipse definitely feels a little bit more messy. There's more of a muddled quality. Technically, Mercury is, so at the time of the eclipse is happening over in Virgo, and Mercury is in Pisces. It is retrograde. It is also technically combust or invisible. And so each of those pieces tells us something else about this eclipse. So the eclipse ruler Mercury being retrograde, that is a clue that is an eclipse about reviewing the past or going back over recent events, experiences, decisions, recent ideas. We're like reviewing and revising. So a lot of those Mercury retrograde things get baked into this eclipse, which also means that we may have bloopers or crossed wires. We might have delays or logistical and transport snafus as well. So this is an eclipse that sort of suggests a little bit of caution around logistics, planning, schedules, transport matters, and maybe not the best day for making decisions or signing important documents. I would do that ideally. I would do it before the moon goes into Virgo, or I would wait until after the moon comes out of Virgo later in the day on Wednesday, or even, if you want to push it to Thursday to be safe. So that's something to think about there. So the eclipse ruler is Mercury retrograde. So we are going back before we go forwards. And I think that ties into the clearing of the South Node, which is with all the great, ideas and dreams and imagination that might be coming in, all your visions for the future, we've got to tie off loose ends from the past, or we need to remove old congestion first. I mentioned that Mercury was technically in detriment. Mercury technically is in detriment and in fall in Pisces. It's the only planet whose detriment and fall and then rulership and exaltation places are the same. So when we say Mercury is in rulership in Virgo, technically it's also exalted there, and Mercury is technically both in fall and in detriment in Pisces. Which means Mercury is not at its eagle-eyed, detailed best in Pisces. Mercury in Pisces is excellent for meditation, poetry, lyrics, having emotional conversations, having healing kind of insights, for daydreaming, for meandering, for going with the flow, for letting your curiosity kind of lead you into unexpected nooks and crannies. But Mercury in Pisces is not great for attending to guidelines or rules or regulations. It's not great for meeting deadlines or due dates. And so that's where we get some of the messiness. If there are kind of strict requirements or tight timelines, that's where we're going to run into a few bloopers and issues under this eclipse ruled by Mercury in detriment. Now, Mercury is also only about 8 degrees away from the sun. So technically, Mercury has entered the state of combustion, which is a clue that this kind of exhaustion, burnt out energy is possible. So if you've been going really hard with a lot of thinking or analyzing or editing or reviewing, maybe you've been like on a bit of a you've been going really well with like planning and getting things done, you're going to need to take a break, because the caution here is if we don't rest and take breaks, we're going to burn out. That's one clue we have to be aware of when a planet that's involved in something has that combustion piece. We also get a planet that is combust has this hidden or invisible quality. And that means that there is this piece of, I may not see something that appears to be right in front of me. And so that's another clue that we are likely to overlook, miss, or even forget things. So Mercury has a little bit of a vague or forgetful quality. And that, again, kind of reiterates why if we don't have to do super important high-level things around this eclipse, it may be best not to. So that's helpful to keep in mind. What is this Mercury combust as ruler of the eclipse perhaps good for? It is good for exploring mysteries. It is good for going into kind of intentionally going into spaces that are about dealing with the invisible or the intangible. So if you want to work on an emotional or energetic matter, this is going to be a great Mercury for doing that. So meditation, if you do past life regression, or if you do hypnosis, if you like to do kind of any type of ritualistic work, from working with tarots to crystals to just tapping into psychic energy, anything that is allowing you to be with your kind of inner or higher self in a non-rational, non-logical way. Because this type of Mercury is like, I want the magic, I want the metaphysics, I want the ethereal, I want the mystical. We're not looking for stuff that we can prove with hard data in a court of law. That's not what this Mercury is good for. But we're looking to kind of be moved or to feel something or to sense into something. So this is a great Mercury even with these technical criteria of being combust or invisible or being retrograde. It's a great Mercury for exploring feelings or sensing into things, for intuiting, for taking space to kind of daydream and imagine and wonder. And maybe take a break from the real world if you can. Let yourself get lost in a story or in some music or a show or some sort of creative thing. If you're looking for like, what should I do on the day? I would read your favorite poets, read your favorite philosophical material, read authors from the past. That would be what I would suggest. Okay, so there's some technical things about Mercury, not great for like details, deadlines, etc., but really good for maybe tapping into magic, wisdom, and all kinds of mystical or philosophical matters. So there's some of the main themes to do with this particular eclipse. The final planet that I want to bring into today's show, and this is definitely a case of leaving the best to last, is talking about the role of Jupiter on the eclipse. So, that's what I'm going to do next. I want to remind you that I do have a free gift for you that I'm going to share about at the end of the show. So I'll tell you how to get that at the end of the show. So let's talk about Jupiter. So Jupiter's role in this eclipse, which I will tell you exactly what it is technically in a minute, but Jupiter's role brings in help and support, encouragement, clues about opportunities for future growth. Jupiter's role kind of creates this quality of grace in terms of, just like understanding or acceptance. And it also brings in a sense of hope. So this is where we've got a lot of work to do with this eclipse from the pieces we've already talked about, the South Node and the Mercury. The South Node is like letting go, clearing out. The Mercury is like, we need some space and time to dream. And now we have Jupiter showing up. And technically what happens is after the eclipse, so the eclipse is 12 Virgo, and the moon obviously continues moving forward from 12 Virgo. And the next planet the moon encounters is Jupiter at 15 Cancer. So 3 degrees, which is about 6 hours in real time. So approximately 6 hours after that exact lunation, that exact eclipse, the moon will be in the sextile with Jupiter. And this is where we get all of those like help, support, uplift energies kicking in. That also helps highlight integrity. So sort of justice or fairness, legal matters. It also sort of points to change and release that will get you to a place of having new or greater freedoms. One of the topics that Jupiter is associated with in ancient astrology that doesn't always get brought in modern astrology is that Jupiter is about freedom. And often that's about freedom of choice, the freedom to make your own choices. So having the agency to decide for yourself. And so as the moon comes out of this eclipse, it's done a lot of like connecting with the past, dealing with what's old, clearing and releasing. Then the moon is ready to think about what's next and how can I make choices about what's next that really are my choices about what's next. So that's the first way that Jupiter shows up is the first aspect that the moon will make after the eclipse. It'll also be the first aspect that the sun makes after the eclipse, which is really lovely. So by the time we get to Thursday, we have a lovely Sun-Jupiter trine. But it's really that it's the moon's next applying aspect that makes it important in the context of this eclipse chart. But the other planet that we've been talking about so much, Mercury, as the eclipse ruler, Mercury itself goes to make a trine to Jupiter in Cancer. So Mercury is around 20 Pisces and moving backwards. It's retrograde. It's in reverse at the time of the eclipse. Mercury's moving kind of slow. And so it's going to take Mercury almost a week to get into that exact aspect with Jupiter. Now that's important because it's a great aspect for Mercury to make in general, but also because Mercury is in Pisces, a sign ruled by Jupiter. Mercury is really attuned to and open to being influenced by Jupiter at the moment. And Jupiter is a great planet to be influenced by right now because it is exalted. So the moon itself, right after the eclipse, goes to Jupiter, and then Mercury is applying to trine Jupiter. And so even though the eclipse itself looks a bit messy and technically kind of muddled based on the South Node and the Mercury rulership, underneath there is this undercurrent of hope, where what is being cleared out is maybe really intentional with a bit of foresight to pave the way for an even better experience and an even brighter future. So with that kind of perspective that Jupiter is really heavily involved in this eclipse chart, even though it'll take a few hours for the moon to get to Jupiter and almost a week for Mercury to get to Jupiter, with that perspective in mind, any endings or clearing or decluttering that you're going through, whether it's of your stuff or your schedule, your mindset and points of view, let it all go now, because as you're doing that, you are actually kind of, making space for the future. So the endings and letting go that you're navigating now can actually make more sense when you think about it in this context. Or you might be able to better motivate yourself to kind of fully participate in what is good for you to close down or simplify at the moment. And I always remember that a good clear out, like a good ending, helps create such a fresh kind of clean slate of energy for future growth. Like I've always, when I've worked with people, clients and students over the years going through endings, like we really encourage and talk about participating consciously in the ending or the closing down, because that allows you to be really complete so that that's done, no loose energy lingering, and then you're ready for the next. So Jupiter secretly kind of underneath this eclipse offering like a buoyancy or an uplift energy that may not be initially apparent, but is certainly going to be helpful in the days and weeks following the eclipse. That Mercury-Jupiter trine aspect will come to fruition around the 9th of March, so it's almost a week later. So the eclipse itself may be one thing, and it may lead to events or developments that kind of culminate around March 9. So keep that in mind as you're navigating the eclipse. So I wanted to let you know that in the spirit of this lovely Jupiter energy, I have put together a free eclipse survival guide that is available free to any of you who would like it. I'm going to put the link in the show notes below, so you can just click that link into your email and the Eclipse Survival Guide will get sent immediately to you. You can also find the link for the free Eclipse Survival Guide over on my Instagram, which is Kelly's Astrology. So whether you want to click the link below or you want to pop over to Instagram, there is a free Eclipse Survival Guide available to you. If we can figure it out, we might have a link on the screen right now and you can just click that to go for it. All right, team, that is it for me for this Virgo eclipse. Thanks so much for joining me for another episode of the Kelly's Astrology podcast. If you have any comments or reflections, you are welcome to share them in the comments below. I look forward to connecting again soon. Until then, take care.